Good morning and a very warm welcome to our webinar on the important subject of digital payment systems. I'm Heather Ramsden, editor of Vending International. As we all know, the pandemic has accelerated the demand for alternative contact-free payment methods in many areas of life, but this is particularly important for the vending industry. So to tackle this heavyweight subject, we have a number of experts who between them know just about everything there is to know about digital payments. We'll be hearing from Caroline Janot, Head of Vending Offer, GSV at Worldline, Darren Anderson, Business Development Manager, Self-Service, GSV at Worldline, and David Llewellyn, Chief Executive of the Vending and Automated Retail Association. I'm sure you'll agree this is a stellar lineup, but just before I hand over, if you do have any questions, please type them in the box below and we'll try our best to answer them at the end of the session. So moving on then, I'll now hand you over to our first speaker, and that's David.
Well, good morning. As you're probably aware, the ABA carries out an annual census. The 2020 census showed that where credit card or cashless systems are fitted, 2/3 of sales were cashless, in addition to being of significantly higher transaction value. This shows the greater demand for cashless options, and in response, the industry has seen a growth in cashless-only machines, although we're still not able to quantify exactly how many, but for that you'll have to look at next year's census. If you pair this rising trend with the difficulties faced when the new pound coin was introduced, which cost the industry nearly £73 million in order to ensure all vending and coffee machines were amended to fit the new coin in time. The industry, we can't be blamed for our bias towards the ongoing development of cashless technologies. In addition to some of the operational and cost benefits of going cashless, no cash handling and shrinkage, reduced banking and handling costs, plus increased machine connectivity and reporting through linking with telemetry and systems such as VendMan or VendManager. At present, almost half, or 47%, of all pay-vend machines now support cashless payments, which is a 327% increase in the last 5 years, according to the ABA census. Cashless payments are now stretching further than just contactless card payments. As payments by smartphone devices have increased by 230%, so from 8% to 27% of transactions in the past 3 years. This is also an indication of a move away from card to phone payment, which is good because this addresses industry concerns about secure customer authentication and the restrictions of 5 transactions on cards. An added benefit, again in the ABA census, is that the average cashless transactions were 58% higher value than cash transactions in 2020. Our prediction is that even after restrictions are lifted across England, consumers will still continue certain learned behaviours, such as choosing to pay with contactless. So even though it's important that for the ABA members to provide cash payment option, in a few years' time, perhaps they may become redundant. But we have to bear in mind, to avoid customer exclusion, there currently should always be a coin payment option in vending and coffee service equipment. In 2018, Her Majesty's Treasury reported in its cash and digital payments in the new economy consultation that 2.7 million adults in the UK still rely entirely and only on cash. However, the consumer shift towards cards, contactless and even phone payment preferences post-pandemic is undeniable. And also, any move towards cashless payment can't be instant, as the Treasury had implied in their original report. It must be organic in order to manage the huge potential cost, around just over 53 million. A number of ABA members have tapped into government digital grants to enable conversion, but these occasions are rare, and we'd love to hear from any other members who have access to government funds in such a way.
Thank you, David, for these insights on the UK market. Really interesting. And hi, everyone. Caroline Janot, speaking on behalf of Worldline. Good morning. And indeed, well, to look beyond the UK and even more broadly at a European level, since indeed, as you can hear, I'm based in France. Well, it is really interesting to reiterate that the strong trends in vending pre-pandemic will keep on growing. These are the figures and numbers we can see now on these slides, which are from the European Vending Association, dated 2019, pre-pandemic. But indeed, we can see here that the machine base counted for more than 4 million units in 2019, with a steadily growth since 2014. With a compound annual growth, as you can see, which was good on the machine base and on the number of vans per machine, above 1.3% and 3.4% for the machine base. And revenue what were 17 billion. So it's with a steady increase also. So definitely, and this trend is here to stay. And there was a strong dynamic and overall growth driven by hot beverage and snacks before the pandemic. We will see the new trends after this period. And definitely, as we pointed out, we were talking about the growth of cashless payment. Well, before the pandemic, 56% of the machines were cashless, according to the EVA. And definitely, based on our own experience and data, and also based on the dynamic we've just seen for the UK market, this trend is there. This strong dynamic will resume post-pandemic, and it's really here to stay. And what has proven is that for sure the society went through an unprecedented crisis. That's for sure. We struggled a lot also in vending. But we've seen that in many sectors, it accelerated the conversion to the latest technologies, as we just discussed, like cashless. And definitely there are many new and other things going on around new needs and usages that have emerged, which are really opening up a world of opportunities for vending players. So let's dive a little bit more into this and go into details on these new usages.
Thanks, Caroline. Darren Anderson from Worldline speaking here. Just to make some brief comments on this slide. As Caroline touches on, I think the strong trends towards cashless, and not just contactless and cashless payments, but what that means for the architecture of vending, especially niche vending and new approaches to vending, which we'll come on to a bit later. We really do see that, agility and innovation from the operators themselves, as well as the, more broadly, the ecosystem of integrators and others, has really sort of picked up a pace since we've, let's say, start to see light at the end of the tunnel rather than perhaps being past any pandemic. But, that self-service culture and different use cases definitely been fueled, and we see new approaches across all kinds of areas. But particularly as the slide touches on, one big area from my own experience in speaking to vendors and partners in the UK and Nordics and even further afield, I think the approach to smart vending. So what do we mean by that? Well, micro markets, AI kiosks, smart coolers, smart fridges. Much of this, I think we see led in the Nordics, with the likes of Sweden already being largely not only a cashless society, but perhaps leading the way sometimes in approaches to modern approaches to vending. So, the user experience is really at the center of all of that. It's got to be tailored to what the consumer is now looking to do, whether that's contactless, but also in terms of product, which I know we'll speak about a bit later as well. No, sorry, Caroline, go ahead.
No, Oh, and indeed, but you'll come back on this point now. One of the big trends we've seen last year and is definitely that consumer behavior is changing, as you were saying, and that indeed operators in vending, a majority of them, of the people connected today, I hope in this call, really expect change in the consumer behavior, and that's definitely a massive change in our industry. So this is what we'll go through a few examples now with what you will just introduce. I think it's interesting to dive into a few examples.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. And indeed, just developing on from, what we've seen or what we've been discussing with partners and contacts in the industry. I think that we know that traditional vending will always have a place, and as David touched on earlier, we have to acknowledge still the use of cash, the expectations of many in traditional vending. We don't suggest that every vending organization will have to suddenly be connected to the Internet of Things and installing artificial intelligence, but there are more and more models that we see where this is desirable. And I think of some recent examples where we've been speaking to merchants, operators, where the way they've approached business in the past, whether that's as a food supplier who drives their van down to a workplace and sells sandwiches and drinks essentially in the car park or some organized zone. Not only are the costs of that something that should be looked at by some businesses, but also that delivery method, given what we've been through recently, is not ideal. And we see already a trend to taking some of that in-house. So typically thinking of workplaces, staff canteens, where consumers want a bit more choice, perhaps more healthy choice, and just more options to, for example, use a kind of shopping basket approach, or be able to, with more ease, or what we would call a frictionless experience, choose their products and pay at the end, rather than perhaps using multiple machines. And the approaches here, I mean, many of you listening today will already be familiar with some of the players in the integration and innovation areas in vending, or what we would call modern vending, niche areas. And that's a really important point. There's not one provider, shall we say, who can perhaps do it all, in inverted commas. So working together with an ecosystem is really important. Of course, from Worldline, we focus on the payments, but we do appreciate that integration, as we see, maybe even with the example there, some kind of tablet or third-party device can really make the difference. So these are discussions that we can have, and many suppliers will have as part of a partnership, rather than trying to provide everything.
And there's certainly been a growth in these additional areas of the market. So if you look at micro markets, again, coming back to the ABA census, I mean, that's showing a 600% growth over the past 3 years. And we're already seeing an apocryphal uplift over the past 18 months as people move away from traditional canteens. And certainly within the equipment itself, significant change in product offer, vegan, vegetarian, and certainly just on the snacks, the healthier snacks market has grown by 147%, or share of the market by 147%.
Yeah, and it really reflects an evolution of the society. I think we cannot ignore that. All of us, after this pandemic, we want to have a healthier life. People are more conscious about what they eat, what they buy, where they buy, where the food is coming from. So indeed, this could be applied to the vending machines in our sector. I think indeed, providing more fresher goods, but also more information on the goods sold in the machine is something to consider in the future. But again, as you pointed out, David and Darren, there are also smart ways, I think, to adapt to these new expectations without making things too complex. And indeed, we can also we can support on this as many other manufacturers, but this has to be taken into consideration. I think the way you buy food in a self-service machine, it has changed. That's for sure. Maybe if we go on the next slide, we can see some initiatives that have been that we've seen in France recently in the same trend. So just an illustration of how things are changing and how things are reinvented. A first one that I like is this creative approach that have been supported in Paris, in the Paris area. Actually, some iconic and old, by the way, newspapers stands have been repurposed and redesigned. Some integrators work with Worldline and operators to modernize these stands, turn them into self-service kiosk. And what I like in this concept is that indeed it really reflects this adaptation that some integrators had to answer the new expectations, to create new customer interactions. But at the same time, here we are reusing some beautiful infrastructures, and I'm sure there are plenty of them in the rest of Europe that we could repurpose. Now it's bringing 24/7 service to people. It's bridging two worlds, the world of direct producers and consumers. And we know that now people are really expecting this kind of interaction and buying direct from local producers. So it's a nice integration, and it's a nice way to see this interaction between payment, mobile payment, self-service, lockers, etc. It was really nice and appealing. Of course, here it sounds we could have many more typically French machines with the baguettes and cheese, and I'm sure we could have also we could find pretty nice ideas for Scottish people with nice Scottish vending machines. But there are plenty of things to reinvent. So what's nice indeed to see that creativity, there are ways to reinvent the way we interact with customers without making things too complex, actually. So it's enriched, actually. And another example, creative, leveraging more, I would say, more modern machine, is a nice machine which is like a smart freezer, let's call it this way, delivering frozen quality meals to employees in their workplace. So this smart vending machine is equipped with an interactive touchscreen, supporting all payment options, the new payment options like mobile wallets, and also supporting meal vouchers, company cards. So payment is really part of the experience on this machine. You can do multi-vends on it, so buy a meal and a dessert through a pretty nice touchscreen interactive one, and with payment fully integrated. So again, here it's a perfect answer to the need for alternatives to conventional canteens, and it's good looking. It's just part of all the examples we could have, and I guess maybe others in this call could have suggestions and ideas or examples of things that occurred in the rest of Europe. But nice examples and initiatives around these new customer journeys to reinvent.
One thing of note has been the incredible growth over the past 3 years of sort of locker and connected units, whether it be smart lockers for industrial PPE, not just masks and sanitizer, but ear defenders, protectors, goggles, that sort of thing, but non-food. I mean, the market's grown by 65%, which is equivalent to about 1.2 billion euros just in the past 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible numbers. And I think, what's really interesting about that, and I see it and hear it even speaking to let's call it the vending ecosystem in the UK and Europe is that innovation and, you know, looking at existing structures or even existing machines that we understand. You know, you're not going to buy a new machine every few years. That's probably economically not possible or desirable. But being able to refurbish and repurpose, as Caroline's been talking about, and then, you know, as David touches on, the actual purpose behind the sale. Is it storage? Is it a product? And on product, of course, and many on the call will know, you know, there's so many more approaches now to what is actually being vended, and the, you know, the transaction value of that can dictate how you do it and what payment solution complements that. And these are important points. And just on that, I mean, on a practical level, you know, leaving aside the thought of a Scottish vending machine, which is probably quite scary, Caroline, and everyone will be writing their own jokes on that one, but the you know, the serious point, I guess, is that when you think about these delivery methods or positions for your vending, you know, the payment service, as I say, has to complement that, and it can be something as simple as, is it outdoor? Will it have some protection from the elements, or will it not? Will it be drive-through, or is it just people on foot only? You know, sometimes these kind of considerations can come a little bit late in the day. So, you know, as any advice should be around that, it's really thinking through the customer journey and the location, connectivity, and all these aspects, which, you know, whichever payment provider you go with, these will be key considerations.
Yeah, and you're right on the example of smart freezers, for instance. Now we are, and the merchant is integrating support of the card rating, loyalty card rating, because indeed initially these are physical. It's a French retailer having physical stores, so their customers have physical loyalty cards still, not only digital loyalty cards. And indeed now they are starting implementing the functionality of the barcode scanning for their customers to scan their loyalty card on the vending machine, and we can support it because the hardware is ready for it, so we are ready to support and implement this feature, so that it will come soon. But it's all about indeed taking into consideration the transaction flow, the use case, and see what would fit the best. But indeed, with the right tools and platforms, then you can. It's evolutive, so that's good. That's interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. And I think the next slide just expands on this a little bit, specifically, you know, around the workplace and the change again, which we highlight to cashless. And I think just to reiterate something, you know, David touched on earlier, which is important, of course. You know, just again on a practical level, I think what I hear quite a lot is the cost and hassle of cash management, and I'm sure, you know, there'll be many in the audience that will know more about that than I will. But it's quite clear that, you know, as David said, there has to be an acknowledgement, and we have to enable people to use cash where possible. But simply put, for the operator, you know, we've touched on some of the motivations, not least an increasing demand from the public, be they your staff in an employee canteen or the public walking past a machine in an airport or railway station. You know, that the ease and security, you know, both for the vendor and consumer, with card payments are important factors. And as Caroline touched on there, closed loop. So your corporate cards, your loyalty cards, what some will know as MyFair, and these kind of brands and approaches. Yeah, increasingly we see a need to give a hybrid solution. So where someone with a debit card or credit card absolutely can tap and buy the product. But for those who maybe have more specific or closed loop wallets and cards, you know, can we enable the use of those too? And it's not always simple, but definitely it's possible and something that we see a growing request for.
Thanks. And yeah, I think when we listen to all the points we just raised, the three of us, I think definitely there are many touch points, many new channels available for consumers. Consumers have new expectations. Even in workplaces, things are changing and we have to convert and support different types of payments. So, I think now the question is, how can vending companies gain really a competitive advantage embracing this new reality? Because for sure, things are really changing and there are new trends coming up now. So with this, vending operators should, like retailers, by the way, feel really the pressure to react quickly and create, as you mentioned, Darren, a frictionless end-to-end experience, because that's key. I think all of us as consumers, we want things to be seamless, simple, easy, and even more now. Indeed, every day you can listen on TV the expectations on people that are now really switched to contactless or cashless payment, just because it's more simple, it's more seamless, it makes life easier. Even if 2 years ago, we were reluctant to, most of the people were reluctant to use these kind of methods. So based on this, we need a seamless user journey, we need fast payment, we need to be agile with the supply chain, especially when we talk about convenience vending. Many companies must invest in more data, technology, systems to deliver these exceptional consumer experiences that everybody expects. But how to do that now at this time where we are already resuming business activity, that we are back to business, and as you were saying, seeing partially the end of the tunnel. And this is where I think the challenges are today for our vending, for vending players and operators. So here we identify 4 key drivers, which that for us are really key, and vending players have to react to this shift that we just mentioned, rethink their operational model. And for us, behind these, there are these 4 key drivers which are key. The first one is flexibility and agility. And I think a very good example is what we've seen recently when the restaurants who have been able to overcome the best the pandemic period were the ones which have been able to deploy quickly outdoor self-service machines. It's secure their revenue, they retain customers. So it was a very good answer for the short-term issues to secure their revenues. But actually, it turned into a longer-term plan, because we see that having these automated machines is a great opportunity for revenue growth. It extends service hours. It diversifies the number of sales channels and the way to reach the end user. So I think that was a good example of what flexibility means and how flexibility is key to cope with the challenges of business and of life, by the way. I'm sure there are other examples around flexibility and agility, so feel free to comment if you wish.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I was just going to add there, as we move through these, that just worth adding that although for many the innovation and possibilities, and for many vending operators, can we say they can often be kind of small enough as such in a good way to be agile and flex to new products, to new approaches. And we saw this through the pandemic without sort of naming names, but lots of really clever pivots to different products, different approaches. I think the security part there, Caroline, is also really interesting, because with cashless and contactless, there are other considerations that merchants should have. And I think, being blunt, with many industries, and I come from an information security background myself, and I can say honestly that vending's no different to many other industries where, payment, the PCI, the payment card industry standards, the compliance and governance that is mandated, as well as just good practice. This has taken a while to establish itself. Even in some of the more advanced industries, let's be honest, we still see areas where, one thinks of the NHS and the public sector and, to aviation, to so many verticals where, security is catching up, really, certainly with the threat. Now, in vending, I don't think it would be fair to paint a picture of, hackers in dark rooms on the other side of the world trying to compromise a vending machine. This is probably not a fair representation of the threat, but security goes beyond that, of course, and it's also the security for the consumer with their data. And as we know, GDPR and other mandates, have a role to play there. But within payments specifically, what we see is that actually, to meet the kind of governance and compliance, let's call it 101, the basics as laid out by standards like PCI, are not so difficult to achieve now when it comes to a basic monitoring of the network and how your payment provider can, let's be honest, the payments aspect is a key part of security. You'll have your own approaches when it comes to supply chain, etc. But in payments, much of that burden should not be with the vending operator. That burden really should sit with the payments provider and how robust their practices are, whether that's around encryption, end-to-end encryption on devices and sharing of data. These are the kind of things you will want to think about, because these standards and the focus on security, whether that's from a European or UK level in terms of what you simply must do, I think these standards will gain more teeth, more traction. So kind of addressing it now is a good idea.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Do you see any issue with the change in the UK from £45 to £100 limit next month, or will it not affect them at all?
Yeah, that's a good point, David. As you rightly say, when we say SCA, strong customer authentication, one of the sort of tenets within there, as you touch on, David, is the need to authenticate. So, in other words, enter your PIN after a certain amount of 5 contactless transactions or to do with value. As you say, David, the limit is going up on contactless transactions, which I think is generally positive. But yeah, just to be very clear, my view of that right now is that for some merchants, operators, be they self-service or otherwise, but generally in a self-service context here today, of course, the cost to change a payment ecosystem to, let's say, mitigate the risk or hopefully avoid that one in a few where they will be asked for a PIN to validate or authenticate themselves, and perhaps the payment device won't allow for that. This is the challenge. And for many, what I find, David, is that, speaking to the market, it really is a risk cost versus risk kind of calculation for each vendor. I think at this stage, it's clearly not a fully fledged mandate that everyone needs to run away and change their payment device if it doesn't have a PIN pad on it. But as time goes on and the SCA standards gain traction and there's more and more weight behind it, it will become more of a consideration within that general security and user journey, how that's addressed in vending.
I suppose there is the issue that you mentioned earlier, I suppose, that less people are using tap and go cards less anyway, because they're moving across to phone payment. Say up to just over a quarter of payments on cashless are now done through the phone, and that doesn't require, I think, because that's an authenticated transaction, isn't it?
Exactly. That's a very good point, David. And yeah, your Apple Pays and Google Pays, wearables, more and more people using these weird and wonderful methods to tap and pay and go. Absolutely. That is an authenticated transaction, as you say.
Yeah. And indeed, well, I think there would be a risk in the future to lose sales. That's sure. The day we will have to also be compliant with these SCA rules in vending. So I think we before, I think when we're talking about being PCI compliant, it was, we were not maybe seeing in vending directly the direct benefit and impact of it. But now, indeed, if you're PCI compliant, definitely you will be ready to comply with other standards in the future, like SCA, which will PSD2, which will come mandatory at a time or another. I think that I agree with you on this, and for sure. So it's vital for the long-term success of a business in today, and at least, if you start from the baseline, if you start with the PCI compliancy, then at least you secure your cost, because the cost to meet the requirements of other standards in the future will be dramatically reduced, and the time for registration also will be better managed. So that's key at that time of the game to think about this. That it's really take security as a vital feature also in vending, even if, as you said, we're not talking about hacking machines, and we're not in the same situation and context than retailers with massive e-commerce platforms. But however, SCA will be compliancy will be requested in the near future, and that could really negatively impact a brand reputation in a business if you're not complying with these standards that will come.
I think that's a really interesting last point. I won't labor the point on security too much, but I think what's fair to say is that one thing to be clear on, whilst it's true, as we say, we don't expect there to be a bunker of hackers targeting vending machines as such, but that's maybe a little bit flippant, because the reality of security these days, and this is really just a kind of non-Worldline authorized comment, if you like, but coming from an InfoSec world, it's only fair to say that it really doesn't matter anymore what industry you're in. The threat is there mainly because most of the bad actors, or the threat actors as they're known, are they're scanning the internet for weak points. They don't really care so much, other than the very targeted attacks, which industry you're in. So, it is very much worth being aware and looking at those basic steps now, particularly around network vulnerability, because that's where people get bitten on the bottom, frankly. And on point 4, Caroline, I was just going to say, you mentioned e-commerce, and again, I wouldn't overstate this omni-channel piece too much for vending as such, because we all understand that quite often you're not trying to take your customer through an e-com, in-store and self-service journey. I mean, clearly self-service is really the key part here, but we do see more and more of these intertwining or combining of sales channels. So if you do have an e-commerce arm, or even a more classic retail aspect to what you do, bringing together the payment view, so from a reporting view for the vendor and also from a consistency for the consumer, this is something, again, your payment provider should be able to help you with.
This takes us to the point of innovation, because all the points you mentioned are indeed related to these innovative technologies that we see now being implemented in vending. As you said, it could be, I would like to order my pizza tomorrow on my mobile app and then pick it up at a kiosk. Certainly, so I expect a bit more of an Internet of Things on the machines, that's for sure. The machine will need to be a bit smarter than it is today in many cases. And indeed, I also expect to have a bit more loyalty or info on the product. So having this on a machine is now, I think, something consumers do expect. So technology and innovation is coming in our world of vending. So IoT, mobile payment. Well, in the future, we know that there will be even more technological features available for us, like facial recognition, etc. But for the short term, I think really IoT, connected machines with more reporting and business analytics, as you mentioned, will be a must-have soon, especially when you look at what you'll have to manage in a vend machine if you're supplying fresher goods and fresher foods to consumers. So, but we'll see later in this discussion that, well, it's also at reach to be innovative and modernize machines without reinvesting massively or reinventing the wheel, we could say. So this is also the beauty of where we stand today.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I think that takes us nicely on to this kind of summary slide, if you like. And I suppose I should mention, or Sylvia, our marketing colleague, will hate me forever. This is the new Worldline colouring and branding you can see there. So there you are. You can now see this lovely green we're using. But the choosing a solution, yeah, I mean, this really just summarizes the key points. You know, the user experience has to be, you know, at the center of what you're trying to do. The right hardware, of course, that this can refer to, you know, how you're delivering your product yourself and what you can do with the machine or the kiosk. But naturally, yes, the payment hardware that sits with that, you know, simply has to complement what you're doing. In other words, a super modern touchscreen machine with, you know, one little cash entry point on the side is probably not smart. But likewise, investing heavily in very advanced hardware on a very old machine, you know, also needs some management as well. But Caroline's point is a good one, and we see it where, you know, at least an older machine and refurbished, you know, the choice of payments on that can really upgrade the customer experience, even if the machine itself is, you know, still an older machine and perhaps not all singing, all dancing, bright lights, touch screens, although of course we see many more of those these days as well. And yeah, the you know, depending on your plans for your business, when it comes to payments, you have to think about the regions you're operating in. That's going to have a huge impact on how your payments flow will work. I appreciate for many of you it's probably a UK focus, but you need to keep that in mind. And yeah, the back office element, you know, I mean, any payment provider worth their salt, I'm sure, will provide you with a portal and ways to interact. But, you know, as Caroline touched on, there's other things to consider there, as many of you will already know very well, whether that's pure telemetry, as we know in the traditional sense, or more innovative, and there's that word again, approaches to, you know, development and developing specific software or a niche solution to give you the visibility and interaction that you want. I'll just move us on from there. And the reason I think this slide is really important is, believe it or not because, you know, we want to put a Worldline product at the end of this and you know, talk about it endlessly. What this is really the core of any payment solution. And what I find, you know, again, frankly, speaking to the market across many, is, of course, everyone's at different levels of maturity on different subjects. But I think in general, it really does need to be highlighted that when you're thinking about your payments partner, your approach to payments, you know, the terminal, the hardware is absolutely a really key part of this, especially in self-service, where it has to be fit for purpose, indoor, outdoor connectivity. It has to play into that user experience we keep banging on about. But that's the facade, absolutely. But what's behind that? Well, there's two key things that you really need to understand behind the terminal, and that's the software. So that can be the payment gateway itself. So how do we accept the payment for you? How is that done? Who does it? As many of you will want to know, what's the cut? What's the commission that a software or a payment gateway, or PSP as they're also known, will take there? But a lot of really interesting stuff can happen around the gateway. And as you can see there, pre-authorization, this is a growing term within the industry, particularly when you think about micro markets. We're all used to it perhaps in petrol forecourts or electrical vehicle charging, where an amount is ring fenced within your account before you can go ahead and actually choose your product and transaction. But in micro markets, AI, fridges, smart kiosks, this is also a consideration. The third part of the payment jigsaw, pretty simple jigsaw if it's only got 3 parts anyway, but I guess we'll carry on with that analogy, is acquiring. And that, of course, is the banking aspect. How, who settles those funds for you, how regularly, and again, what's the cut, what's the commission, the fee that's taken from your €1 or £1 transaction. Now, I think it's only right to say that probably only the bigger vendors and retailers will think about in any way breaking up that ecosystem of payments, because to do so, honestly, it's a bit more hassle and doesn't make sense for everyone. But transparency is the point I'm trying to get to here. So whichever direction you take with your payments partner, I think it's always worth understanding, how do they break down, hardware, gateway, and acquiring? There doesn't always have to be the gateway in the middle, by the way, but that's maybe a discussion for another day. In general, that's that PSP aspect in the middle. Of course, there can also be third-party software, so the payment application, your integration with your electronic cash register or your existing point of sale approach. And thinking back to those slides earlier on the micro markets, that might mean, okay, I'm going to have an Android tablet that sits on the door of my smart fridge, and I want my payment device to be connected as a slave to that, or to sit separate. The architecture of it needs to be looked at case by case, but that integration and understanding that with payments, it's not just the price of the terminal. It is, of course, the ongoing cost of doing business that you need to think about, and transparency is good in that area. Unless David or Caroline have anything to add there, I'll take us on to the final couple of slides. Now, this is where we have to admit this is us trying to promote something, but at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. The hardware, as we say, is a key bit now, especially in vending. I know that many of you are rightly focused on what does the hardware do, how big is it, does it fit in the standard EVA, apertures, what's the connectivity options? Don't worry, we're not going to spend the rest of today going over that in detail, but here's just a bit of visibility and a view. And if nothing else, I'll use this just to say, for many of you, you may be familiar with the name Ingenico, and for others, the name Worldline. Well, this is one and the same now. So Worldline, very big, global French payments company, bought the company I used to work for, Ingenico, another big French payments company, last year. So, we are one and the same now. I think the strength of that is that both companies had a strong product set, probably more so Ingenico. If you've tapped your card on a small silver bit of metal in Sainsbury's or Marks and Spencer's or McDonald's self-service lately, it's very likely that's an Ingenico bit of kit. But anyway, the evolution of this is the Self range, Self 2000, Self 4000, with the Velina, also a very appropriate self-service device. For what it's worth, that comes from the Worldline portfolio as such. But, this is all together now. You can see some comments there. I don't know, Caroline, whether you want to add anything here.
Yes, well, I think when you look at these pictures, at least what thing is striking is that you can see that now with a reader, a non-attended device like the ones we are seeing today here on this picture, you can, there are color screens there. Some of them are touch screens. They can read any type of payment method. And the nice thing is that actually just replacing a reader by another more modern with a color screen and a touch screen, you can upgrade, as we were saying earlier, your vending machine and bring it to the new standards. Because at the end of the day, these readers are compliant with the EVA form factor, NAMA standards. So it's just easy and quick to replace and swap an older technology by a newer one. So you're like changing the user, the purchasing experience for the customer at the machine without, as we were saying, reinvesting massively on new smart machines, which can be, indeed, we fully understand, a massive investment for an integrator and customer. So
yeah, thanks, Caroline. And yeah, as I say, we present these, of course, because we're Worldline, and this is what part of what we offer. But I think what's really interesting looking at these, you could almost say from any supplier, is that again it takes us back to those considerations you will have about the future of your business, your customer experience, pin pad, pin on glass. Are we happy? Do we want to use the touch screen for more marketing related things? Do we need a camera? These are all, whichever supplier you go to, of course, these are the aspects you want to think about, as well as that outdoor aspect, what kind of durability and different ratings. So please always consider that, of course, with your selection of supplier. And it's, it's only fair to say, some will look at using different suppliers at different aspects, as I touched on in the last slide. I think for most vendors, however, and we all know who's been, very successful in the payment space and vending to date, and a lot of that is down to, one-stop shop convenience. And we absolutely get that is, a big driver for many operators in vending. On this one, Caroline?
Yes, well, a quick wrap up just to comment on what we just said. Indeed, and beyond paying, on the machine with your credit card, we know that tomorrow the smartphone will be part of the journey. It is already today, and maybe not yet fully on vend machines and in vending consumer journeys yet, even if we see already nice initiatives everywhere in the world. But indeed, as you were talking about component parts, and for sure with Worldline or with any other company, actually what an integrator has to consider today is being sure to have the right bricks, the right building blocks and components to be able to answer to the current expectation of customers, but also be ready for the future. So having being able tomorrow to propose web, in-app or mobile integration to its final customers will be really key. Supporting payment methods all over Europe, you mentioned it, but indeed, especially in large cities now, we see that there are plenty of ways to pay, and as an integrator and vending operator, you'll have to be able to support these payment methods. And this is where the gateway is coming into the game, as you were mentioning. Why a gateway? Well, this is where it will simplify also the way to manage your estate and your fleet, with being able to support card payment, mobile payment, maybe the day after tomorrow, online payment, and have a consolidated views and reporting on all your payment channels. So this is where I think this is something that needs really to be considered now by vending integrators, just to get ready for the future and being able to evolve more easily in a flex manner in the future.
Thanks, Caroline. I think that takes us to the final slide there, Heather.
All right, thanks everyone. I I think that's very expertly covered a subject that's now essential to vending, and I'm sure you've cleared up some gaps in knowledge on the subject this morning. Just remember, anybody who's logged in this morning, you can use the box below to ask your questions, and obviously we'll try our best to answer them. But just a couple of questions from me, if I may, just to sum up. David, how would you describe the uptake of digital payment systems among UK operators?
I think, as I said at the beginning, there's been a significant uptick over the past 3 years up until the start of the COVID and the pandemic. And it's going to be interesting to see as we come through to the next stage of our AVA census on how that is reflected. So again, 47% of all pay vending machines now have cashless systems on. We would expect that to be significantly more. What we don't know is how many are just cashless. And it would appear from talking to operators and members that machines which are now going out now have both coin mix and cashless payment systems on them. At what stage they will be going out with just cashless systems on, we don't know. It'll be interesting to see when we come to next year's census.
Okay, so that census is one to look out for next year. Caroline, what's your message to those operators who are yet to or are slow to adopt digital payment systems?
Well, I think it has been proven here in this discussion that it's you have to go in this direction. Don't wait. Don't put your business at risk for the future. Not maybe now, but in a 2 years' time. Contactless and cashless payment is there, and you should take the opportunity now to upgrade your fleet now. So that's a must-have. But the step is not that high, as we said. So I think relying on the good partner with the right blocks, and I hope this meeting today helped integrators to understand that it's in reach and that it's just about to consider what are the bricks I need to have around me now to be able to build the right solution in the future and be ready and adaptive. Yeah, as we said, there are ways to upgrade your existing vending machines easily and quickly with simple integration and simple solutions. So don't hesitate.
So there's some options available for those with older machines who don't want the expense of buying new machines?
Yeah, well, as we said, with the EVA compliant readers, you can swap a previous solution and you can replace an old payment solution with a new one quite easily and quickly. Now, and I would sum up in saying that, well, let's make your life easy. Definitely, we've seen that new challenges and new needs are there on the market. But again, it's easy to get there. You just have to make your life simple. Rely on the right people, the right experts to outsource complexity. And payment is complex, that's for sure. So make payment simple, get rid of complexity, and then you can pick and choose the building blocks you want in the future to evolve. So start with the migration to cashless and contactless as a first step, but rely on the right partner just to make your life easy, secure your business, and keep on doing your core business on a daily basis. Others can manage payment complexity for you.
Thanks. And just a final question for you, Darren. Do you foresee a significant growth of smart vending machines in the UK? And how important will this be for the uptake of digital payment systems?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Yeah, I mean, I think David did a great job earlier of touching on, some of the really impressive growth numbers we see in that area. And I touched on, kind of Scandinavia leading the way. And I think what's really clear is that model or those models work, and they really have seen, an increase in revenues and overall basket spend with those approaches. So, as we touched on earlier, I've already been involved in conversations often between the provider, the supplier of, be it food or whatever, and then also the integrator, and then us as the payment. So again, just to reiterate, you often need one or two partners to make this stuff work. It's not about, Worldline will do it all or anyone else will do it all. But, if you get that right and you think about the customer experience, then, micro markets, smart fridges, absolutely, this is the direction, particularly in a workplace environment, canteens, etc., student, university canteens. We see a really strong growth in this area, and it's sustainable for the future. And as I say, it opens up more options, more sales revenue for the operator. So yes, from the payment side, as we say, it's really about integration. So there's a bit of technology to be thought about there, and as I said earlier, whether it's integrating with a tablet or another third-party system, absolutely these things need to be think about. There could be a little bit more time and money sometimes in that plan than you might think at the outset. So a bit of caution as always, but definitely doable and definitely the future.
Okay, thank you. It doesn't look like we've got any questions lined up at the minute. I think that means you've obviously covered everything very succinctly within the presentation. But of course, if you do have any further questions, the team from Worldline or David will be happy to answer them after the session. I think there's some contact details on the screen right now. And is there anything either of you would like to add before we bring the session to a close?
From my side, no, just to say thank you to everyone for attending, of course, and please do use the email addresses you see there if you want to follow up on anything. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've come to the end of the session, but obviously if you'd like to refresh your memory about anything that's been said today, or to invite any of your colleagues to watch the session, there will be a recording and that will be available very soon. So I think all that's left for me to say is to thank all of our speakers this morning, and we'll bring the session to a close. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good day. Bye.